And away we go. It is the Nightcap right here on BearcatJournal.com, brought to you by our good friends at Galactic Fried Chicken. Visit www.galacticfriedchicken.com. Android, iPhone, everything Galactic. Get delivery. Get, be bold, be brave. Make sure you get yourself down to Dayton, Kentucky. Tell them to pump it up and save 15%. All right, Aaron, let's get after it. It's a Friday night. You've already almost fallen asleep on the couch. The times are tough these days. I get it. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. Staying awake is hard.
I was out mowing. I've had some adult beverages.
Well, you told me to pull back the curtain a little bit. You were like, going out to dinner. My family's in town from Cincinnati. Give me like 9:30. I was like, all right, 9:30, 10, somewhere around there. So I'm just kind of hanging out. My wife's family is on the way up from Nashville, so they're still like an hour and a half out. And I was like, I'll just wait on Aaron. It'll be cool. They finally were like, all right, we're going over to Kelly's mom's to wait for her sister to arrive. And I was like, shit, it's almost 11 o'clock. We probably should do the content at some point in time tonight. People are going to be curious. Where's the content, boys? So here we are with the content. We had a question today. And we encourage this. If you guys have content ideas for the Nightcap, especially during the summer, this is kind of the stuff that keeps this fresh, keeps it a little fun. Well, it just, instead of I don't want it to be so
monotonous.
formulaic. Yeah, I don't want it to be like the same thing over and over again every time that we do the show. So here's an interesting one, Aaron. And there's layers that we're going to have to discuss before we get into this conversation, right? Because it's not an easy question to answer if you do it without the layers.
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati 2020 football versus Cincinnati 2022 football.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the hard part. And Skins, I'll give him credit. When I first saw the question, this was my initial reaction was, how do we answer this question if we don't acknowledge, comparing Cincinnati 2020 after the Georgia game isn't the same as comparing Cincinnati 2022
before anything's happened.
2.5 months before the season starts.
We don't know who the quarterback is.
Well, even then, if you rewind, there was a lot of conversation between Ben Bryant and Des Ridder going into the 2020 season because Des had a good but not great 2019.
Ben Bryant
was hurt.
Ben Bryant, that rascal, always throwing a wrench in things.
Des got hurt in the Ohio State game.
Yeah.
He got hurt again in the USF game.
Well,
largely, he played through it.
I was going to say, he never really was 100% after the Ohio State game. The whole season.
For the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
So, going into that season, there were plenty of questions. Plenty of concerns. Mike Warren was gone. There was, as there has been pretty much in every year Luke has been here, questions about the offensive line.
Sure.
We knew the defense should be good or would be good at that point. There was confidence in that. But the wide receiver room had just been gutted. Yeah. And completely reorganized.
Uh-huh.
Josiah DeGuara was gone because that was the offseason he got drafted at Green Bay.
Right.
So there was a lot of promise and hope with Lenny and Josh coming up, but like Bruno was the number one tight end on that team,
and you didn't have a ton of confidence. You knew
Bruno was really good, but what was Bruno was like an offensive threat, right?
Right, not a superstar.
Right. So I say all that to say this question is not easy to answer if you take it as before that season.
Right.
They were coming off, 2018 when they won double-digit games was a shock. Shock.
Yes. I mean,
they had almost gone 1-11.
Right. Coming off the season they came off of. Yeah, we were all surprised, and that was obviously the beginning of the trajectory up for the entirety of the program.
They back it up in 2019 by winning double-digit games again.
Right.
And going to the final week of the regular season against Memphis, not getting the home field advantage in the conference championship game.
Correct.
And then losing a nail-biter in the conference championship game.
Correct.
Right on the cusp of playing in a New Year's Six Bowl in 2019. But there were a lot of questions, man.
Yeah.
Mike Warren was gone. That's the biggest thing from that team, I think. There was hope that Jared Dokes was ready, but there was a lot of concern, is Jared Dokes a guy that can stay healthy? Remember, he was coming off a shoulder surgery that offseason.
Yeah, I mean, that was maybe the biggest thing about Dokes' entire career, right? Can he be healthy?
When's
he going to play again?
Healthy, he's really good.
Sure.
But when's he going to be healthy?
He was a bruiser.
So now, compare that to where this is at.
I think the most intriguing thing about comparing the two teams is just how many question marks. If you go back to the beginning of the season of that 2019.
No, 2020.
2020.
2020 season.
2020.
And then COVID. Right? We were wondering at Higher Ground if that team was going to play a game.
Well, you didn't even get to go to Higher Ground, right?
No, I didn't, but
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, you didn't. No one even got to go to Higher Ground for that.
We didn't even know if they were going to practice. We're talking about practice, man.
Didn't know if there was going to be. Didn't know if there was going to even be a Higher Ground. Didn't know if there was going to be a single game.
Right.
Things got weird with baseball. Things got weird with football. Not even at the collegiate level, but just professional sports in general. I mean, there were question marks littered throughout the entirety of the roster, and all of a sudden they came out hair on fire.
They had a major COVID outbreak. They missed multiple games.
Yeah. The conference was in shambles. I mean, how many games did Houston miss?
Yeah. So I don't know the proper way to answer this question, because the easy answer is that team not only had the 9 draft picks from this year, but also had Wiggins, Forrest, Dokes, Jimmy Smith,
Hudson.
In retrospect, this team is not anywhere close to that team.
No.
If you're comparing what we learned at the end of that season to what we know now about this team.
And I think that's where you can kind of hang your hat in this entirety of this conversation.
Correct.
What does this team look like 9 months from now, 10 months from now, when we're looking back at all of the questions that we had and kicking ourselves for, who didn't expect Lorenz Metz to be the starting right tackle?
Right. Who didn't think Jaheim Thomas was going to be a monster?
Who didn't think Corey Kiner, especially after talking to Brady on Monday and getting the 411 on, he was not healthy at LSU, and we have been working him back to healthy.
Who didn't think Nick Martindale and Jaden Thompson were going to become a full complement to
all conference
Tyler
players?
Scott
and something ridiculous.
Right. And Trey Tucker and Josh and Lenny are healthy, and it's the most think how close the past 2 years we've been to the best offense in UC history.
Mm-hmm.
And the weapons are as good or better than any of those teams, including 2009.
I think that's inarguable at this point.
What we don't know is the quarterback. That's what we don't know, right? That's
the biggest unknown.
What we don't know.
That's the biggest unknown because once you go from
there are other things we don't know.
No, but I think that's the one that makes the biggest difference.
Right.
All things being said, where and who's to say that even after the Arkansas game that whoever starts that game is the starter for game 2?
Right. We don't have any clue like what that answer is. So it's a fascinating question.
I mean, what if Coach Luke Fickell comes out and runs one quarterback for one series, one quarterback for a second?
I don't see it. No, I don't see it.
I don't think so either, and I don't even know that we're even going to see the gimmicky stuff. If Evan starts, obviously we're not going to see the gimmicky stuff. I
think it's going to be who wins the job.
But I think that's going to be. I don't know that any of us know
who's going to win the job.
Or if you do
I don't think they know who's going to win the job.
Or if you do know, you're not even allowed to say prior to.
Right, that's fair.
Prior to the gun sounding off.
Well, here's the thing.
Kickoff.
This is the unknown. I think going into the spring, there was a feeling that we should know by this point in time if Ben had clearly separated himself from Evan.
We've even talked about that in this space. When we were doing the quarterback comparison, I believe, for that particular nightcap on the quarterback room, I think we talked about that there was not an understanding, even just an estimation that Ben had the upper hand and Evan elevated himself.
Yeah.
Which was what we were all hoping was going to happen anyway. Exactly. It goes back to the mantra of this team, the iron sharpens iron. Like, it's not just bullshit. Like, these guys truly live, breathe, and eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, so
here we are. We don't know.
No.
I think they would have preferred to know, right? Like,
I mean, given the situation, the fact that one has elevated the other to where you have two bona fide starters at this point, wouldn't you rather have two bona fide starters than one just completely head and shoulders above the other, but maybe still only at the same skill?
I think you would rather have had an answer.
Oil separating
an answer's easy, right? They say they want the competition, but if you have an answer, was it easier last year knowing Ben had left and Dez was your quarterback and there were no questions?
What do you tell me all the time, though, about practice? You say spring, especially spring practice. Spring practice is spring practice. Like, don't put too much into anything. They're still trying to figure things out.
Sure.
I mean, there were a lot of things that were being figured out. Cummings getting his first look at the offensive line.
Yeah, we just talked about that
right
last night.
So maybe there's not anything to put. Maybe nobody should be putting too much into what happened in spring and more worried about who emerges in the first week at Camp Hire.
Yeah, I'm not putting a ton into it other than saying the thought was potentially Ben dominates the spring and walks away with this. And Ben had a very good spring.
Sure.
But so did Evan. So now we go into higher ground without an answer.
I think that's okay.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying when we're comparing it to 2020, there was an answer.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And I say that because through everything that happened in 2019, it was very clear Dez was QB1. If it wasn't clear, there wouldn't have been as many questions as we had at that point, right?
And don't get me wrong, like, I think that the Ben Bryant story gets completely muddled if he doesn't end up winning this job.
Yeah.
But that said, I think that goes a long way to shore up that Evan Prater was who you thought he was when you recruited him as your highest recruit in school history.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I know, like, probably to people listening, what I'm saying is confusing.
Yes. I get it because I know how we've
talked about it a million times. So, like, you get what I'm saying. Like, if I'm comparing it to that team,
yes,
the picture at quarterback isn't nearly as clear as the picture was going into that. Like, yes, they said Ben and Dez were in a quarterback competition going into 2020.
I just think we almost need to put a pin in this one, right? And revisit this exact same nightcap at the end of the season.
Now, right?
At the end of the season when we know
I want to answer. Okay, here's what I'll say. If you're asking me which top to bottom roster is more talented going into the season, I'll take 2022. Look, we're talking about.
So you're talking about
June 7th conversation.
June 17, 2020 and June 17, 2022. Okay.
Yes. I would think this roster has more talent than I thought that roster had June 17th, 2022 or 2020.
Yes. I'll agree.
I think the offense is more balanced. I think you're returning 5 starters on the offensive line. I think, yes, like we don't know at corner, but I feel really good at linebacker. There's a bunch of dudes on the defensive line that we know are good.
And you've stacked 3 of the highest recruiting classes in program history.
So the question on June 17th, 2022 is I would take 2022 when compared to June 17th, 2020.
So December 17, 2022, when we're doing a nightcap.
Write this down. And it might have to be January 17th.
Who knows? So maybe we're talking about completely different things based on what the school's accomplished. Sure.
That's why it's a fascinating question. Because I just like going into that season, man. We didn't know.
The funniest part about this is trying to fit this conversation particularly into 15 minutes when I think both of us would go on for 45. 45 more minutes. Easy.
You and Brent can share this on Monday if you guys want to.
I feel like there's going to be a lot going on Monday.
Yeah, well, we talked about it. It's okay. We talked about it. It'll be fun. But it's an interesting topic. It's a topic that
sure.
Like, here's why it's an interesting topic. Because you could have 5 different people on and have 5 different answers.
Yeah, but I mean, that's any question we bring up.
No, but I mean, just because of, like we just talked about, there's so many different angles that, look, going into 2020, I wasn't sure how this thing was going to work without Mike Warren.
We weren't sure college football was going to continue to be a thing.
Well, yeah, that too. But I mean, from the minute Mike Warren became the first ever early entrant into the NFL draft, Mike Warren was the backbone of 2018 and 2019.
Yes.
They rode the wave of Mike Warren offensively. And then that was going to be gone. And we had no clue. And the wide receiver room was completely disconstructed.
In shambles.
It wasn't in shambles.
No, not.
It was being.
There was caution tape everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Under construction. The wide receiver room was under construction. Turned out, it worked out really well.
Sure did.
But going into 2020, we didn't know that. We didn't know, we didn't know if Dokes could stay healthy. There was a million questions. I think we forget that when we talk about the end of that season. That's all.
I look forward to revisiting this topic.
I do too. Look, Bearcat Nation, it was a great conversation. I loved it. I don't know that we gave a great answer.
Again, I think that this conversation is completely different in 7 months, 6-7 months.
Right.
When we know what we know, as opposed to the intangibles. But if we had to, I think we both agree, if we had to answer right now, today, what we know now, as opposed to what we knew in June prior to that 2020 season, this team has more talent.
Yeah, and I say that strictly because at this point in 2020, we weren't sure Des Ridder was great.
Whether that equates to more wins or not, time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. Great nightcap. Love it. Love stuff like this. Give us more. Well, after I get back from vacation. He's Aaron Smith. I'm Chad Brendel. It's the Galactic Fried Chicken Nightcap right here on BearcatJournal.com.
See ya!